Hi, and welcome to another lecture. In this philosophy lecture, I will discuss Plato's Metaphysics. In particular, I will discuss the forms, the sun, the divided line, and the allegory of the cave. These, by the way, can be found in the Republic of Plato in books 6 and 7. Plato was an Athenian philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece. He was born roughly around 428 and died in 348 BCE. Remember, this is before the Common Era. Okay, so this is more than 400 years before the birth of Christ. He was one of the greatest philosophers ever existed. and also he's famous for being the founder of the Academy. The Academy was a school of philosophy, a sort of prototype of a modern university. And many people studied there, one of whom was the famous Aristotle. Plato had a very interesting metaphysics, and his view of reality was, I have to say, inspired by previous philosophers, pre-Socratic philosophers. I have a video on the pre-Socratic philosophers, don't miss that. Plato argued that we live in a physical realm, but this realm of everyday, where we experience friends, pizzas, babies, trucks, etc., is not the real world. This is some sort of an illusion, just like in the film The Matrix. If you ever watched The Matrix, this is just an illusion. But the difference is that in the Matrix, there's the Matrix. We are deceived on purpose. According to Plato, we're not deceived. We are just we live in illusion, and we have to understand that this is not the real world, because the real world cannot possibly be understood, seen, and known through the senses, through our eyes and all our senses. We know reality through our intellect, but we cannot see it directly. We only understand it through our senses, as I will explain in a minute. Plato is also famous for many dialogues, one of which is the Republic that I just mentioned, the Euthyphro, the Meno, and in his style is very interesting because he does not write philosophical treatises. He would write dialogues. That was his style. So it's like you're reading a dialogue, a play, for example. You're reading Shakespeare. There are different characters, and he uses these characters to advance his philosophical ideas. Typically, Socrates is one of the main characters in his dialogues. And Socrates is used as a mouthpiece for Plato's ideas. In all these dialogues, Plato discusses these important ideas, these important notions, and he's convinced that we must understand concepts such as justice, friendship, law, love, etc., by carefully analyzing the concepts and trying to understand the essence. There's an essence. Later on in the modern contemporary philosophy, you will see a shift toward a different idea of reality. For example, nominalism, where or other forms of ontology and metaphysics, where concepts such as love and friendship and so on are just words used in a certain game. For example, I'm referring to Wittgenstein, who, unlike Plato, didn't think that there's an essence in a word. When we say dog, we're not referring to some form of dogness or dog that exists in a Platonic paradise. Okay. Now let me start this by showing you this beautiful fresco. This is known as the School of Athens, La Scuola di Atene, by the Italian Renaissance artist Raffaello. This is a fresco that you can see in the Vatican, one of the rooms in the Vatican in Rome, and it was painted around the 1509, the 1500s, early 1500s. And it is the School of Athens, the school of Plato, where you can see several characters. In particular, focus in the center of the image, and you see two individuals. You see on the left, pointing his finger toward the sky, you see Plato. And on the right side, which would be Plato's left side, is Aristotle. Aristotle doing this with his hand. And this captures Aristotle's versus Plato's metaphysics. See that Plato is pointing toward the sky because he wants to say that reality is not here on this level, like Aristotle is saying. Reality for Plato is in a different realm, in the forms. So the first theory, metaphysical theory that I want to discuss of Plato is the theory of forms, the famous theory of forms. As I was saying earlier, what is real? Metaphysics, as I explained in my lecture on metaphysics, among other things, asks the question of what it is out there. What is real? What is reality? Plato answered that question by saying that reality is divided into two different realms. Two different realms, two very different realms. Completely different realms, in fact. But they are somehow connected. How they're connected, that's a different story. We don't know. But they are connected. You see, there is a realm of appearance. In this realm, we feel things, we use our senses, and we experience all sorts of things and beings and people. But what we experience, according to Plato, is just examples. Examples, or let me put it this way, copies, like photocopies, not the original. So, for example, in your life, your lifetime, you experience love, friendship, you buy a car, you have a dog, you have a house. But according to Plato, all these objects are not really real, but they are copies. Or another way to put it is that these objects and people and things and concepts participate in a certain form that is universal. And that's what reality is. Reality is not something that we can actually see. Reality is something beyond our senses. Our mind has the power of perceiving, knowing, seeing, in a metaphorical sense, reality. And to see the forms that give a meaning to friendship, to law, to justice, love, etc. So we don't see the copies, but we see the originals. But we don't see them with our eyes. We see them with our minds, with our reasoning. Take, for example, the form of beauty. Now think about it. There are many things that are beautiful, that might be beautiful. For example, see if you recognize these figures. The first one is Grace Jones. Second is Paul Newman. Obviously, the third is a beautiful flower. And the fourth one is the Mona Lisa. But think about how completely different these objects are. I mean, Grace Jones is very different from Paul Newman. And they're very different from a flower and from a painting. And yet, we can speak of these objects as being beautiful, as being as having something in common, which is beauty. So they evince, they express different forms of beauty, but beauty, the concept of beauty, is one, is always one. As a matter of fact, you could have different tastes. For example, I might find personally Grace Jones to be a beautiful woman. Some people might not find it so. Might say, nah, she's not a really beautiful woman. Similarly with the Mona Lisa, or with a flower, or Paul Newman. So different people have different tastes. And yet, different people have the same idea, according to Plato, of beauty. Because beauty is something universal. Something universal that when it comes to our physical realm, beauty, in a way, confers upon physical objects, like people, like objects, like flowers. It confers upon them its essence. And thereby, these objects are recognized by us as beautiful. Or, as I said before, another way to put it is that Grace Jones, Paul Newman, flowers, paintings, all participate, or may not participate, in the form of beauty. But mind you, the form of beauty is not something specific, like a flower, like Paul Newman. It's perhaps it shouldn't even called beautiful, but the beautiful itself might not be beautiful in the sense that we get when we look at a beautiful thing, something that we call beautiful. It's an abstract object. It's a form. It's a Platonic form. Similarly, there are many other examples of this. For example, right. Okay, what is right? Well, there are many things that are right, depending on people. Now, I'm not here endorsing moral relativism. I am not a moral relativist, in fact. Neither is Plato moral relativist. But the point is that, for example, if you come here to New York City, where I live, which is part of New York State, we have a legal system. And as you all know, different states have slightly different legal systems. But which state is right? Well, that's a kind of a wrong question, because it depends on the state. The state establishes certain laws and regulations. So what is right in New York City, for example, in some states, jaywalking is not wrong. In others, you can be fined for jaywalking. But which is right? Well, that's, as I said, it's the wrong question. But Plato would say, despite the fact that there are many different legal systems, different interpretations of the right, there is one concept that unifies all the legal systems, all the ideas of right. Let me give you a final example. For example, I am married, and I love my wife, and also I consider my wife as a friend, not only as my wife. So there's a certain relationship, not only as spouses, but also as friends. Also, my children. I love my children, and I regard my children not only as children, but also as friends. And I have other friends. Robert, Zenon, these are my friends, and I love them, and we are friends. So as you can see, there are different forms of friendship. The friendship between myself and my wife, myself and my children, and my friends. And yet, friendship, when I think about friendship is not something that will end. For example, my friendship with my friends might end. I hope it won't. But you know, sometimes people have arguments, and the friendship dissipates and ends. But suppose that my friendship with one of my friends ends. Friendship itself does not end, because friendship is something that exists beyond the physical world. And so friendship is that universal concept that confers upon physical object in this physical realm their essence. Okay, so in the next slides, I will explain three of Plato's most famous allegories. The allegories of the sun, which can be found in Book 6, 507a. The divided line, also in Book 6, 509d. And the allegory, the famous allegory of the cave, which is in Book 7, 514a. Let me start with the cave. So in the Republic, there's a discussion about justice. And Plato explains, Socrates explains that the just ruler, the the so-called philosopher king, is an individual who has studied philosophy to a certain degree and has acquired the knowledge of the forms, those forms that I was discussing in a previous slide. And in order to understand the education that people, but in particular the philosopher kings, the guardians of the state, have to undergo, Socrates uses this allegory, the allegory of a cave. Let me read it and then I'll explain it. And now, I said, let me show in a figure how far our nature is enlightened or unenlightened. Behold, human beings living in an underground den, which has a mouth open towards the light and reaching all along the den. Here they have been from their childhood and have their legs and necks chained so that they cannot move and can only see before them, being prevented by the chains from turning round their heads. Above and behind them, a fire is blazing at a distance. And between the fire and the prisoners, there is a raised way. And you will see, if you look, a low wall built along the way, like the screen which marionette players have in front of them, over which they show their puppets. All right, so what is this interesting allegory? What is the meaning? Well, let's look at this picture for a moment to see to picture exactly what Plato has in mind. There are different depictions when you Google them, by the way. I chose this one because it has both the cave and the outside of the cave. Now, in that section of the Republic, Plato continues, and he says, so first he describes the cave. And as he says, notice that there are these individuals who are chained and they are looking at a wall. Notice that they are looking at shapes, forms. They're looking at shadows. That's what they're looking at. And there's a wall, that wall that divides them from, it's a division. It's like a division within a division, as we'll see in the divided line. So there is their world, the world of human beings, because that's what the meaning of the allegory is. We live in a cave, but we don't even live here by the fire. Most of us, most people, live right here in this section of the world. They live in the shadows. They live among the shadows. Their lives, and for most people, I have to say, for most people, their entire existence is in this world, in the world among shadows. They never actually go past the wall. So what do they see? They see shadows on the wall. They hear noises. They hear sounds. But mind you, Plato once said in the Republic, indeed, he says in the Republic, that all the sounds and the shapes, the shadows that the prisoners see are not obviously sounds that come directly from the shadows. They come from behind the wall. What's behind the wall? just like the images. So these, as I said, represent society. Most people in our society will never, unfortunately, they will never get past the world of shadows. And the world of shadows essentially is a world, a materialistic world. Different philosophers, different thinkers have imagined this allegory, similar allegory, in many different ways. For example, if you take Buddhism, in Buddhism, we also live a sort of illusion created by our senses, because we desire things. We are attached to a material world, and that's all we know. But that's an illusion, and nirvana will be the extinguishing of the passions, where we liberate ourselves from the chains, and we become part of reality. And similarly, here Plato has a different view, a different allegory, but that's a similar meaning. We are in chain. We are chained, and we live. Many of us live in this world that is a world of shadows, of material things. We don't know any deeper meanings. And many people don't want to know many deeper meanings. That's because they don't want to educate themselves. They're lazy. They're just comfortable the way they are. And they will never unchain themselves, or allow anyone to unchain themselves. See? And the curious thing Plato says is that when these prisoners see the images on the cave wall, they might have even competitions among each other. Who's the fastest one at recognizing the shadow? Who knows better about the shadow? I mean, think about how petty it is. This is what Plato wants us to know, wants to tell us, that most people's lives are petty because they think that it is honorable to know the things they know. But they are deluded because they know things that are absolutely base or low or very insignificant. Very insignificant, of course, relative to truth, relative to the world, relative to reality. You know, when people are expert in sports and in horses and food and sex and love, they say all sorts of things. Not that these things are not important. They are important, but they are important in this realm, in the physical realm. But when you think about truth, when you think about reality, knowledge, these things are completely insignificant. They're petty. They're small. Okay? But people pride themselves of knowing the material things, knowing about cars, knowing about movie stars, and so on. So this is the superficial world, the world of shadow that most people live their lives. Now, what about this side of the wall? Well, this side of the wall is interesting because it is still inside the cave. But as you can see, there are individuals who are carrying the very archetypes, the very shapes that project their shadows against the cave wall. Well, these individuals have a better understanding, obviously, a better viewpoint of what's going on. They still live in the cave, okay? They still live in the cave, although they have a better understanding. At least they know that the images on the cave wall, they might be important, but they're not real. They're not real. They're just an illusion. And perhaps these individuals are the state, politicians, people who participate in a grand deception against humanity. Okay, these are the ads, the corporations, all those entities that try to sell us something, or try to make us believe in something. As I said, these could represent, for Plato, politicians, religions, okay, cultures, all sorts of groups that project their desires onto the cave wall, and are trying to persuade human beings, especially take advantage sometimes, often, of human beings who are chained in the other side of the cave, on the other side of the wall. And here is the fire. The fire is the source of life, in a sense, in a metaphorical sense, you see. Because the fire is responsible for heat. It is responsible for light. And so the fire. The fire represents life, and it represents knowledge, the source of knowledge. You see, because it is because of the fire that human beings are able to see. Without the fire, it's dark. There's nothing. And it is because of the fire, thanks to the fire, that the shadows exist and are projected against the wall. So now, what Plato now explains is the following. At one point, someone goes down the cave and liberates one of the slaves, or one of the prisoners, I should say, not the slaves. He unchains one of the prisoners. Now, there are several things that can happen when you unchain one of these individuals. What can happen? Well, for example, one thing that can happen is that the prisoner pushes you away and says, "What are you trying to do? Leave me alone." And he unchains back himself, back to his world. Very complacent. He wants to live that way, or she. Another thing that can happen is that the prisoner becomes curious, and it starts turning his head and notice that there's a wall. Again, he might go back to the chains, might be scared, or perhaps wonder what's behind the wall. And another situation is precisely going over the wall and seeing the shapes carried by the people. So some people realize, or this person who just unchained himself, not himself, but who was unchained, might realize, oh, that's just the life, the shadow. Okay, life among the shadows is miserable. So this person, this individual, might join even the force of the politicians or the religions, might live his entire life inside the other chamber of the wall, the other chamber of the cave, on the other side of the wall, by the fire. And that's it. That's the end of the story. Okay? He might even go back and say, but you know what? This is not the kind of life that I want. It's too complicated. It was better when I was ignorant because I was happy. Now there's a complex life here. There are forms, there are shapes, there are people, there are deception, there's a fire that we have to keep alive. All right, well, Plato, however, doesn't describe these scenarios. What Plato describes is another scenario. That the prisoner is is freed from the chains, and he is so curious that he notices that he lives in a cave, and he has the courage and the strength and the curiosity to ascend, to walk outside the cave. Now, I remind you, this this event in the life of this individual is traumatic because, well, think about it. First of all, his muscles were atrophied because he never used them. So walking is painful. Seeing the light produced by the fire is painful. Walking up the steps outside the cave, that is incredibly painful. It's incredibly hard to do. So very few are able to go all the way up. Once they reach the mouth of the cave and they get out of the cave, their eyes are dazzled by a much, much stronger light. That's the light of the sun. That's when the prisoner is shocked, completely shocked, and for a couple of days, for a period, that prisoner is not capable of seeing anything or understanding anything. But in time, as his eyes and muscles get adjusted to the new reality, to reality, I should say, now he sees the real shapes. He doesn't see a shadow of a tree or an archetype of a tree, but the actual tree, the actual horse, the actual sounds. Now he can see everything. And ultimately, he can see the sun. And he realizes that the sun is the equivalent of the fire that was important for life, for light, for heat, for knowledge. Now he realizes that it is the sun that enables him to see. Not only that, but the sun makes it possible for himself to exist, for this prisoner to exist, for the trees to exist, for the waters, for the world, for reality to exist. At this point, the prisoner has knowledge. Only at this point, he has knowledge. Now think about it. If you lived your most of your life in a cave, like the prisoners, chained down, and at one point, someone frees you from the chains, and you're able to walk all the way out of the cave. Now, by the way, who or what is this person that liberates you from the chain? That, Plato wants to say, it's education. It is education. Think about it. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it beautiful, this allegory? It is education. A lot of people are lazy. They don't want to educate themselves. It is hard to read books, study, read, write, do research. It's very hard. But it pays off. It pays off because it unchains you and it shows you a different reality. But then that reality is not enough, because you realize the scheme, you realize the illusion, you realize the deception. Now you can continue studying and see how far it goes. And that sort of education, higher education that all of you college students, university students are getting, that sort of education enables you to go to the next level. From the lives of the shadow to the life of the fire, and all the way up and outside the cave. That's what education does. And it dazzles your eyes, your mind. It is shocking. It is a shock. When you start learning something, it is shocking, because at one point you don't even, at first you don't even recognize yourself. It feels strange. It feels exciting and strange at the same time. You feel almost scared of this knowledge that you acquired. But now you have it. And what happens when you have this knowledge? Well, now you look back and you think of the people in the cave. You feel sorry for them. You feel very sorry. They don't know. They don't even know. As a matter of fact, what happens is that in the Republic, Plato explains to us that Socrates, right, that this person is so excited about his new knowledge. I mean, think about it. You get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, or a PhD. Now you're so excited that you want to do something about it. You want to tell people. You want to tell the world, hey, for example, you write a book and you tell the world, look, this is reality. This is truth. Right? You write a book, for example, about politics, and you tell people what's going on in the cave. So in the metaphor, Socrates explains, you, or the prisoner, a former prisoner, I have to say, is so excited about his knowledge He knows, he sees the actual trees and the sun and the water. He wants to tell everybody. And so he goes back down to the cave. Now think about it. His eyes are not used to it. He sees everything dark. He can't see the way he used to see when he was a prisoner. And now the other prisoners make fun of him. They think he's crazy. Can't you see the horse on the wall? No, not really. Not really. Ah, you ruined your eyes, they say to you. You ruined your mind. Don't you see that the horse is before the dog? No, I don't see it. Because you're stupid. You're ignorant. Okay? No, but people, listen. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that the horse is before the cart, or before the horse, or before the dog. All that is insignificant. What are the prisoners are going to say to him? They say, you're stupid and leave us alone. You're actually dangerous. They will try to kill him. What are you trying to do? Change our minds? Don't even try. Don't touch my chains. Don't touch my life. This is knowledge. This is life. You were brainwashed. I don't know what happened to you. Your eyes are ruined. Your mind is ruined. You're no longer capable of seeing the horses and all these shapes and hear the sounds correctly. This is what happens to the former prisoner. So the former prisoner is just keeps trying, educating the prisoners. Some will listen. Some will not, and will try to be very recalcitrant and fight the truth. That's the allegory of the cave. Okay, now let's talk about the divided line, because the divided line is another allegory that is very related to the cave, as I will show you. Let me read the passage first. Now take a line which has been cut into 2 equal parts, okay? And divide each of them again in the same proportion, and suppose the 2 main divisions to answer, one to the visible and the other to the intelligible, and then compare the subdivisions in respect of their clearness and want of clearness. And you will find that the first section in the sphere of the visible consists of images. And by images I mean, in the first place, shadows. And in the second place, reflections in water and in solid, smooth and polished bodies, and the like. Do you understand? So this is how Plato imagines the line. Now, as you can see, on this end of the line, I placed the cave, because that's essentially what this side of the line represents. Once again, goes back to the cave. And in the opposite side, there is the sun. So when you divide the line, as I said, first you divide it in half, and then you divide it again into other more sections. So you have this section, the section D, you have C, CB, and BA, or the other way around, whichever way you want. Now, all these sections here, C and D in this section here, these sections represent the world of illusion. This is the visible realm. the realm that I showed you in the picture of the cave. And there are two divisions, if you remember. There's this up to D, which is the world of shadow. And this, you can regard this as the wall. Behind the wall, the section CD is where the as I said, the religions and the politicians and the state exists. They run the show, and the fire is there. So this is the world of, represents the world of physical objects, the world of shadows, of images. Now, in the world, in the first section is just shadows, and that's the world of illusion, according to Plato. It's the world of opinion. When people say, I'm an expert in sports, I'm an expert in men, in women, I'm an expert in food, that's just the world of opinion. Next to it, there's the world of physical objects. But this is still the as I said, the visible realm, inside the cave. And this is the world of belief. Not an illusion, but belief. So what happens is that when you free yourself from the illusions, maybe with some education, you grow up, you start seeing things, you start understanding about politics, about religion, and so on. But this is not a world of knowledge. This is still a world of opinion. People have opinions about religion, about right, about morality. The next sections represent the life outside the cave. They represent the intelligible realm. Now think about it. There are things that you can quantify, okay, that you can see. For example, mathematical reasoning. You can write down the formula. You can write down the results. So these are aspects of knowledge that you can quantify, that you can see. And they represent knowledge. Mathematical thinking is abstract thinking. So you don't actually see the entities, the numbers that you are calculating. And at the same time, calculating, doing mathematical work enables your mind to move to a higher level of understanding and knowledge. But there is yet a higher level of understanding and knowledge that Plato calls dialectic. Now, in this, the highest level of education is where you understand concepts such as justice, love. Okay, this is where you are able. Your mind is able to perceive, to see the actual forms. This is knowledge, because knowledge, remember, for Plato, is based on things that never change. If things change, then you cannot say that you have knowledge of them, because you have opinions. For example, Plato would say a judge in a Supreme Court in New York City has not knowledge of the right. She has an opinion. It might be a right opinion, an informed opinion, but it's just an opinion of the law. Very different from knowing the actual form, the actual essence of law, the actual essence of right, of moral, or other examples of friendship, of love, justice, and so on. So this is the intelligible world, and this is the real reality. This is reality. How do we know reality? How do we know things? Notice again, the idea is that the division between knowledge and opinion. Everything that we think we know about the physical world, it's nothing but opinion. Only mathematical reasoning, philosophical reasoning, dialectic, all the knowledge of concepts, those aspects are what reality is. They make up reality. And think about it. These are aspects that have nothing to do with the physical world, the physical reality. I mean, nothing to do. They exert their power, their essence, and so we experience mathematical things. We experience, for example, 3 apples. But the way we understand the concept of 3 is not by seeing 3 apples, but by thinking about mathematical objects. Okay? The way we know about love is because we perceive with our minds the form of love. But then you and your boyfriend, you and your girlfriend, that's an example. It's an experience of love, but it's not love itself. Okay. Now, after the divided line, let me end with the sun. The sun is a very important allegory. Let me read these 2 passages first. The sun provides not only the power of being seen for things seen, but, as I think you will agree, also their generation and growth and nature, although it is not itself generation. Similarly, with things known, you will agree that the good is not only the cause of their becoming known, but the cause that they are, the cause of their state of being, although the good is not itself a state of being, but something transcending far beyond it in dignity and power. Well, what I'm saying is that it's goodness which gives the things we know their truth and makes it possible for people to have knowledge. It is responsible for knowledge and truth. You should think of it as being within the intelligible realm, but you shouldn't identify it with knowledge and truth. Otherwise, you'll be wrong. For all their value, it is even more valuable. In the other realm, it is right to regard light and sight as resembling the sun. So, in this realm, it is right to regard knowledge and truth as resembling goodness, but not to identify either of them with goodness, which should be rated even more highly. So, the sun represents the light. The sun represents the source of light, the source of life, and the source of knowledge. And it is good. Now, one thing that I wanted to say about the sun is somehow with Plato's idea. I have to say, at least personally, I speak for myself, when we talk about the sun and what's going on in the sun and outside the cave, that's a little not very clear. How ironic. It's the sun. It should be clear. But for Plato, the sun represents God. Okay? Now, the sun represents the good, what we call the good. Why good? Because according to Plato, the good, there are, as I explained, in the intelligible realm, there are forms of justice, forms of love, forms, mathematical forms, etc. And participating in these forms is good. Okay? It is good, and it is good for us because we know these things, we know these forms, and so knowledge is good, is the good itself. And the good, or the sun for the forms, is what gives the forms, all the forms, their life. They don't just exist willy-nilly. They are given their essence by this form that somehow encompasses all the forms, that gives life to all the forms, and that is the sun. It's not justice, but it gives the essence of justice to the form of justice. See? And so this is the highest possible form that we understand, we know through a life of education. And so this is the end of the lecture. The point of the lecture was to explain Plato's metaphysics. As you can see, Plato understands metaphysics as two different realms, the realm of shadows and the intelligible realm, the realm of light. Later on through the centuries, many other philosophers adopted this model. One in particular that I have in mind is Augustine. Augustine also has the city of man and the city of God, and this idea of the priority of knowledge, things that exist here in this realm, and things that represent knowledge, divine things, and the objects that exist outside the cave. So according to Plato, reality is not physical. Reality is something that we can see with our mind's eyes, but not with our senses. Okay, great. I'll see you in the next lecture. Thank you for watching.